Okay, as we get started, the net sheet template. Okay, quick reminder, what's the first step when you use the template before you actually start filling anything in?
Make a copy, name it your client's name.
Okay, file, make a copy, and name it your client's name. And then I usually close the template so that I don't do something stupid like go right back onto the same tab and mess up my template. So Heather, should we do your house? All right, so Heather White, that sheet. Make a copy. And like I said, then I usually try to close the template so that I don't accidentally start working on that tab. Because knowing my ADD, I will do that at some point. So once I make the copy, I close the tab that the template is on so that I don't accidentally start filling out the net sheet on the tab that the template's on. It has happened before, and I just don't want to take the risk. So the only tab I now have open would be the net sheet for the client that I'm working on. You know that using the share button, you can share the net sheet with your clients. I typically share it after I've got it filled out. I've usually let them go ahead and let them edit it. That way they can play around with the numbers and give them an opportunity to depending how technologically savvy they are. I'll show them how to just right click and make a copy of the column and let them play with the numbers. So they feel like, helps them feel like they've got some control, but it also gives them a kind of a cleaner view about what could happen. So we're going to start with Heather's house. Before we put in a sale price, let's go ahead and put some information in here. Number of liens or mortgages against the house. That number 1 is for the primary lien. Okay. What is the balance on your current mortgage? Most people are going to probably just look at their last statement that will tell them what the balance is. And that's the easiest way to go about it.
Yeah, it's 257, 951, 94.
Okay. I'm just going to, what? Oh, hold on. Always put it in the right spot. $257, $954. What did this thing just do? Okay, we're gonna back that. All right, 257. It's 257, 954. Okay. Usually what I try to do in a situation like that is let's just go ahead and round it to 258. Makes the math easier. And you may have just made a payment, so it could be it's going to be a little bit different from that. And that's why I say this is a good rough estimate. The title company, when they order the payoff amount, will have to order it as of the actual date you're closing. And so they will have it down to the nickels, dimes, and pennies on what that payoff amount is. Because it continues to accrue interest, all those things we talked about yesterday when we were going over these. They've got to do it as of a specific day. Okay. Do you have any kind of second loan on the house? Okay. This is where we have a conversation about if they have solar panels, are they going to have the buyer pay off the solar panels, or are they as the seller going to pay off the solar panels? Okay. Incidentally, about how much value do appraisers give to solar panels on a home?
I would say not much, but I don't know much either.
There isn't a set standard yet. Some of the there have been efforts to try to take a look or create some kind of formula as to the size of the panels, the amount of energy they produce, per kilowatt hour, to try to come up with a number that way. The appraiser we had that spoke to us last year said they put on average, about $5,000 on a $20,000 to $30,000 product. So they can add some marketability, and I have had clients that were very interested in looking at homes with solar until they found out that most of them had not had the solar on the home long enough to make up any value, and consequently they were looking for the buyer to try to pay it off or assume the debt.
Yeah, well, it was whether this money owed on that system.
And some early systems were sold as a lease. You leased the panels, which means if the new buyer doesn't take over the lease, the company has the right to come and remove them from the panels from the property, which then raises the specter of then who fixes the roof once those are off.
Were there some agreements early on where the solar panels would put power back on the grid and they'd actually get a credit
Yes,
from them?
yes.
Okay.
You-
Which in turn would, be kind of a revenue generator if it's still, if the contract and the agreement still in place, right?
It can be. The current Utah requirement is the home has to remain on the regular grid so that the home always has electricity. If in the event of, our short winters, they don't generate power in the middle of the night. Unless you have storage batteries, you're going to be back on the grid. So those agreements do exist. For FHA and VA, it is a requirement that the home have full-time access to electricity. So if you have some type of alternative electrical source, there has to be proof that there's some attachment to the grid. Okay, all those things we talked about, yeah, and we've talked before about in this spot, you can put anything else that they intend to pay off with the sale of the home. I paid off student loans with the sale of a home. Made it easier to get the funding for the next home because the student loans were no longer there. We've had all kinds of stuff paid off. Outstanding alimony or child support. So we want to put anything in there that we need to. Are they paying off credit cards? In this case, Heather, you said you don't have any balance there. So I'm just going to put a balance of $0 in there. And you'll notice now that the green bar automatically does the math for us and adds the primary and secondary payoff together. Now, at this point, the buyer's agent commission is showing up as 0, and so is the seller's commission, because we haven't put a sales price in yet.
It's $469,700.
So your CMA came up with $469,700. Let's make the math easy and just go ahead and do 470,000.
And,
Okay.
I think I have to change it to 8 to 9.
So at 470,000, you've got 258,000 to pay off. Now, the buyer's agent and the seller's agent commissions are separated on here so that a seller can see the difference. That the exclusive right to sell they signed with us shows a 6% commission to the brokerage. And then there's a separate line that shows what the offered buyer agent commission will be on the MLS, what percentage. And it's to help this helps them visualize that if it's 6% to our brokerage and then a 3% buyer agent commission, this isn't 6% to us and another 3% to the buyer agent commission. It comes out of that 6%. And again, there can be some flexibility with that. With my brother-in-law, if I were to list his house, I would be a little willing to adjust this a little bit because I know he was looking at a $970,000 home. So if I'm gonna do a sell buy, then there's a little flexibility here. If you're trying to help someone sell so they can buy, especially if they're in a situation where they need to move. A lot of my military clients are only here 3 years and then they get transferred. They've got to move. They may not have as much equity. So I'll play with that a little bit. If they're in a tight spot. We have actually had sellers who, even at the height of the market, had to bring money in to close. Guy bought a brand new construction at the height of the market, took 10 months to get it built. He lived in it 8 months, got a job offer in Idaho, back where he grew up, that he absolutely loved, decided to move. Well, he bought it on a VA 0 down. Well, 8 months, there wasn't enough market appreciation to cover his closing costs, the commission and everything else, and he had to bring in a check at closing to pay off everything else. To him, it was worth it to take a better job in Idaho. But this helps him visualize what a difference it would be. On this one, just the difference, I'm going to put these both the same number so you can see the difference. Just changing it from a 3% seller's commission, just changing it to 2.5%. And when you put the decimal in, just type it in as a regular number, 2.5, because it's preset to show as percentage. It's preset to do the math as a percentage. That's the difference between 23,400 and 19,500. It's almost a $4,000 difference for you at that point. So they can see what a difference that might make. I know there's a brokerage here in the Valley that always lists it. Their agency requirement is a 6%, but their split's 3.5 to the broker listing, 2.5 to the buyer. Because they're fronting all the cost up front for all of the liability up front for taking the listing. Let's go.
Right.
Okay, it's something, obviously something you can go talk with your seller about. So in light of that, we've got a 3% for our buyer commission, 3% for our seller commission. Now, annual taxes, did you look up the taxes on yours? How much are they?
They were 2,140 last year, and they're gonna be 2,200 this year.
Well,
Yeah. If you already have, I've noticed that some areas where, like Salt Lake County, we're getting the notification earlier than we have in the past.
Yeah.
We usually expect to get it about September. We got ours a couple weeks ago. And if you live in Jordan School District just approved a property tax increase for teacher salary, because as the market has softened and home values have gone down, they were looking at losing on a median income home, the amount that they just raised the property tax means they almost break even from where they were a year ago when they did the budget. So their mill levy went up so they could try to break even. So that can change. The start year for the prorations, again, we leave that as 12/31/2022. So it really starts counting as of January 1st of this year. On the closing date, when you click on it to put in a date, please note it's a little confusing because it keeps going back to the same year as the proration begins. So make sure that your calendar year is correct, and you can click through like you can any calendar. And this is where we have to have a serious, a real conversation about them. When would it reasonably, when would this home reasonably close?
10/1/2023.
So we're thinking October 1st?
Yeah.
That's a Sunday.
Okay. October.
Okay. And that's a good part, and that's a good opportunity to have a conversation with them about your home is in that median price range that right now we're seeing. If we go on the MLS, we could look at in you're in Salem, Spanish Fork, so we could look at the Utah County, what the average number of days on market in Utah County is right now. It's about 40 days. So October seems like a pretty reasonable time. We could actually close ahead of that, might be a little bit behind it, but let's go ahead and set that as a let's work around this date. And then it pre-figures how many days to prorate the taxes, and you'll notice it's showing the proration amount. Okay, owner's policy of title insurance. We're just going to Google title insurance calculator. First American has one, Old Republic has one, Stewart Title has one. If you're in a hurry, you can use any one of these. If you want a more specific amount, contact Amanda Ashby at Real Advantage. Send her a quick email. Amanda, this is the home I'm looking at. What would your estimate on title insurance for the seller be at this price? And the other closing costs? What's the settlement fee going to be? And what is because you got a settlement fee, what's the reconveyance fee? Right now we have it set at 90 because that's the average of the Utah counties, keeps going up. And settlement fees can depend on where it's located, how far they're going to have to travel. If they're going to have to send it paperwork someplace and have a notary meet them. You know, there is a Real Advantage office in St. George. They could work through that office. But if the closing is in Camas, from here, they might have to send somebody. Or if it's, you know, we've got a St. George office, but they got to do a closing in Kanab, they might have to send somebody. So that closing fee could be a little bit higher, settlement fee. In this case, we're just going to run a quick and dirty here. With FATCO, we're going to put that it's Utah property county. It can change by county. Transaction type. Now, there's a reason it has different types in here. If it is a cash sale, it could be slightly different. The only way that a title company can handle the cash in a cash sale is that they have to provide a policy. That's why the buyer and the seller end up at the same title company with a cash sale, is that the title company has to provide a policy to one of the parties in order to handle the money. We're just going to go ahead and do this as sale with mortgage. Sale amount. Let's see. We listed your home at 470,000. 470. 1, 2, 3. Loan amount. I'm not going to worry about that quite yet. And disclosure type. We just want the regular loan estimate closing disclosure. Please select all fees. Da-da-da. Okay, sorry, my bad. Now what? Oh, please select a city. See, you notice it won't let you move forward without making sure everything's filled in. Closing office. Oh my heavens, I did miss a bunch of spots today. We're just going to go with a basic policy. That's what's usually covered. Not going to worry about a protection letter right now. I just leave everything at the default. What's it telling me? Oh, enter. Oh. So the sale was for 470,000. There we go. Okay, number of property descriptions, 1. Conveyance of deed, 1. See, sometimes occasionally you'll see a listing that'll say that here's the property and there's this other little piece of property next to it that's included. That has a separate tax ID number. 99% of the time, you're not going to worry about that. So this is showing us that Fatco is going to charge the seller about $2,300, $2,342. Yep.
Mine on Old Republic title, just because that's what I clicked on,
Yep.
and it says 2003.
So usually what I do is I'm going to say, look, it's going to be about 2,400. That way we've built in some wiggle room. Settlement fee, title fees, actual. Yeah, for Fatco to do the closing, for the seller, $345. On here, we've got 250. Most of them have gone up to about 350. So we could update that. Reconveyance fee is going to depend on the county. Recording fees for the seller. Yeah, $42 each, twice. So yeah, about $90. So that's why we put that in there, is that's the average. Settlement fee.
So what else did you change on here?
So I updated the settlement fee to 350. There are two separate spots for settlement fees, just in case there's something else that comes up, like they have to have, if it's a mail away, or there's some kind of other fee that gets charged. If it's a trust and everybody on the trust has to sign it, and this thing's got to be mailed all over creation to get it back, those kinds of things. Like I said earlier, if it's not where the office is, but they can have a mobile notary go meet them. So it's just kind of planning ahead for any kind of contingency like that. And then initially, we're going to plan this as if they are not doing any kind of seller's closing costs. And the other encumbrances are home warranties. Home warranties now are now between $600 and $700, depending on the provider. Because the cost of repairs and everything else just keeps going up, like everything else. So I'm going to actually move this up to, and a lot of buyers are asking for home warranties now, just because they're starting to understand they're buying the appliances you use. They have no idea what's going to happen. I got a call while I was at Bear Lake over the weekend. One of my buyers, who when we put him under contract, we did not have home warranty marked in the contract. But as we went through the process, we decided to order one. And so I paid for it for him. It was his closing gift. He called me over the weekend. It was 85 degrees in the house. The compressor he could hear turning on, but nothing was happening. And he couldn't find the paperwork. And so I went in his file and pulled up it was IBEX that he went with, gave him the invoice number, the phone number, said, call these guys right now and they'll get out there. They're a really good company. And if you have someone who's buying a home that has an air conditioning unit, and they are buying anytime in the late fall or during the winter when that unit is turned off, if it's below 50 degrees, most inspectors won't turn the unit on, because it will damage the unit. I asked my son, who does HVAC, about that, why they won't. He said the bearing ring for the fan is the most replaced item that they deal with, because either the unit has settled slightly, and so over time, every time that thing turns off during the summer, all of the lubricating fluids float to one side. Then the first time it turns on, all the bearings on the upper side are dry, and they'll scratch the inside of the bearing ring to start damage it. If it's cold, that hardens, and then you go turn the unit on to inspect it, and those bearings have no lubrication, and they just rip up the inside of the bearing ring, and pretty soon your fan's out of balance. And once the fan's out of balance, then it'll burn out the clutch that goes with it and everything else. It's just a cascading mess downhill from there. Well, he bought this house over the wintertime, So we couldn't check the AC. They'll always check the furnace. And the AC was working a month ago. It's not working now. So it was worth it for the $700 when he called for me to say, yeah, here's what it is. So that is a conversation to have with your seller as well, is do you expect to see a lot of offers, excuse me, with some kind of home warranty? Typically where the buyer is going to request the home warranty, but the seller's paying for it. And many of the home warranty companies we recommend, like America Home Shield and Ibex, have a listing home warranty that's usually like 50 or $100 that your seller can pay for up front, so that if anything breaks down while it's listed, it's covered. And that can be credited toward the purchase of the buyer's home warranty. Because I've had crazy things happen at showings. I walked into a home that was only a few years old, and we went downstairs, and it was unfinished. It was only partially finished basement. They were using it as a workout room, and they had the rubber no-slip mats. And I walked around the corner, stepped on the no-slip mat, and about landed on my tailbone because it was soaking wet. In the time between when the sellers left the home and we showed up to do the showing, the water heater seal had failed and it was draining itself all over the floor. And so I shut the water off to the water heater and immediately called the agent and said, let your people know this is what's happened. I've turned the water off at the water, at the valve. But it's it was by the drain, but it was gushing all over the floor. I've had 2 water heaters fail. I had one fail during the purchase process. So having something like that as protection. And they don't have somebody come back griping afterward about, you didn't tell me that this thing could have died.
Are those home warranties, are they just 1 year?
They are typically valid for 1 year. But then to renew it is less expensive. If you purchase it at closing, just about every company that offers them, it's a lower price at closing and the protection starts immediately. If your buyer's been in the home for a month or 2 and decides to purchase one on their own, they can, but they tend to be at a higher cost. And there's usually like a 30-day wait period because they don't want people to buy it. And then the next day, somehow the fridge died that day. It was already failing. And so they went and got the home warranty. So that's part of that conversation. And again, part of the conversation with the seller, if you do this at closing, then if something happens 2 days later, the furnace quits working, they're not going to come after you and say, you didn't tell me the furnace was dying. Okay. So right now with these numbers, you're looking to make about 179,000. You got some equity there.
I 100% am. My husband is 100%.
I know a good realtor if you're interested. The advantage
My husband is totally not.
The advantage to using this is that you're going to oftentimes have in this, if it's a multiple seller situation, one who's more numbers oriented than the other is. And this lets the numbers person see what could happen. The brother-in-law that I met with last night, he's a numbers guy. And so he's looking at numbers. I'm following up with him because heck yeah, I'd like a $970,000 purchase and do his listing. But I also know his personality, that he's got to go over the numbers and they've got to make sense lots of ways. Now, the other advantage to this is now you can also say to him, well, look, I'm going to right click and I'm going to snarky all of a sudden. I want to go to the right, insert a column to the right. Then I can right click on this again, copy the whole thing, move it over one spot, paste it. And now if I say, look, 470 is kind of that, was that the high end or was that the low end on your CMA?
It was about the middle. Well, let me look at it again. So I didn't really, so I put in like some comps.
Mm-hmm.
And it's better than most, and some of them, it's about the middle.
Okay. So if we said, look, if we were going to do this, what is your drop dead? I need to make at least this much out of the house before I can move. Because right now at 470, you're looking, and you don't pay any closing costs, which we're seeing a lot more of, anywhere from 2 to 3% of purchase price.
Yeah, I would say, so the low price of this was 434 and the high was 481.
Okay, so if we went with a low of 440. So if we sold it at 440 the way that it is, you come, and no closing costs. At that price, you're paying your own closing costs. Now you can see about how much you come away with. That's why I let them have the chance to play with the numbers, because they can also say, okay, but at 440, you're probably looking like an FHA or somebody who may not have a whole lot in savings. So they could be asking for closing costs. And closing costs are about 2 to 3%. So if we shoot high here, 440 times 0.03, you're looking somebody, if we put yes, we're going to pay somebody's closing costs, but a big capital Y here, we're looking it's going to be in about the 13,000 range. Okay, now you're down to 138. Is that enough for you to make the move? But you said the high end was 480. So I'm going to label this list, middle, because where is this most likely going to get interest? If you list it at 440, are you going to get a lot of interest? Are you going to get enough interest to potentially push it to 470? A year ago, yes. Now, probably not. Okay, in the spring, maybe. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put insert another column to the right. And let's go, if we list this super high, this is where you're not going to get as much, you may not get as much interest in it, but the people who are looking at it are probably the serious buyers. At the 440s, you may be getting tire kickers. Well, maybe if I wait another month, it'll go down a little more. But 440s, you drop dead point. At 480, let's just kind of plan ahead. If somebody asks for, see, now we're looking, it's going to be closer to, maybe 14,000 in closing costs. Because that's one thing we didn't include in the, oops, something's missing here. Oh, I know what's missing here. A closing deadline. Now, do you know how to do this little trick on Google Sheets? If you grab a hold of that corner and drag it, not that way, drag it across. Come on, it'll copy it. Unfortunately, it just moved it over one day. There we go. Something else is missing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 480. Now you're up to about 175. Would that get you to move?
480? Yeah,
Yeah? Would it get your husband to move?
I don't know. It was a total project when we bought this house, so we redid everything in it, and so he would never do that again, so it'd have to be like something grander, and he doesn't, well, he won, because I was like, yeah, I want to list the house, we went and looked at a couple of houses in Salem, and I was like, I figure it'll raise our payment about $500 a month, and he was like, I don't want to raise our payment $500 a month, because we haven't sold any houses yet, and then he went and bought a huge trailer that's $500 a month.
Yeah, math.
I'm not paying for it. Like, I'll give you my trailer that's paid off. They gave him $30,000 for it, but I'm not paying one payment on that trailer ever. Cause I wanted a house, you wanted a trailer, there you go, there's your trailer.
As someone who's bought a project house before, we bought it as an investment, but I can also see where you get kind of an emotional tie to it. Every nail, every screw, every tile you put in means something.
Yeah, well, he's never doing it again, so he's like, that was not fun, and I'm not doing it again, so you better find a brand new house.
I don't fault him there. I would rather, and that's the way my brother-in-law has done a lot of work on this house that we were talking about. So this one that we were trying to do a net sheet on, but the one he's buying, they have done a ton of work on as well. But for him, his personality is he did everything high end. He's like my father-in-law. He did a lot of the work. It's a beautiful home. There's just kind of that hook. And yeah, I could make 175,000 on this, or but am I gonna have to pack everything up and move it?
And what's like this, like, as well. He's like, I don't know who you're gonna have come and move all this fancy stuff, but I'm good.
So these are for the numbers side. This is how you help people understand the number side of it. The emotional side, that's where you being human with them comes in. My brother-in-law said, yeah, the thought of moving. I said, I get it. Totally get it. I've been in our house 20 years. We moved from 950 square feet to 2,100 square feet and thought we'll never fill this place. Now I walk around the house going, where'd all this crap come from? My wife's like, see those bookshelves? They weren't there when we moved in. Oh, yeah, my bad. So I went to a bookstore again last night. Didn't show her the receipt until we got home. She's like, $40. Hey, 2 of the books were yours. The other 5 are mine.
For that many books is a big deal.
It's a used bookstore that's by our house, and I wanted to try it out. Yeah, me spending $40 on books is a slow day.
Yeah, books are expensive.
So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording. So that it's a decent length, and